Welcome to the Gold Medal Girls podcast, part of the Women's Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Delaney Thibodeau. Gold Medal Girls is all about sharing the experiences of women in sports, including athletes, coaches, trainers, sports psychologists, executives, and tons more. We're here to promote these amazing people to build more and more support for women in sports. Be sure to listen as episodes will drop every other Tuesday, and I'll be interviewing a woman in athletics so we can learn more about their lives and amplify their voices. I hope you're as excited as I am to hear what they have to say. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. Welcome to episode 4 of Gold Medal Girls. This episode features an interview with one of my best friends and amazing woman in sport, Sarah Lindquist. She's an athletic trainer at the University of California, Berkeley, and during the interview, we talked about what it's like to be on the front lines of managing injuries during competition, how to leverage sports psychology into advancing player performance as they return to sport after being injured, and the differences in working with injured athletes ranging from youth sport, where you've got parents involved, to high performance competitions where there can be things like scholarships on the line. I've known Sarah since 2019 when we did our master's in sport and exercise psychology together at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and I'm so excited for y'all to hear her stories. With that said, here's my conversation with Sarah Lindquist.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
So excited. We talk all the time, but this is extra special, it feels like. You have been working as an athletic trainer at University of California, Berkeley for several years now. Has it been 3 years, 2 years?
This is my third year.
Third year, yeah. Can you describe the work that you do as an athletic trainer for anybody who might not be familiar with what that means?
Yeah, so athletic training is like a bridge amongst all different aspects of athletics. We see an athlete, so we're healthcare workers, healthcare professionals first and foremost. And we see athletes when they're healthy, through injury, and then back rehabilitated back onto the field or the court or whatever.
Mhm.
We specialize in rehabilitation, evaluation of injuries, but even things like wound care. We have lots of admin roles. Um, but yeah,
That's a lot
that's
of
in a
jobs.
nutshell. Yeah, we wear plenty of hats.
What kind of training goes into athletic training?
So it's changed over the years. I got a 4-year bachelor's degree in athletic training, and then I got my master's degree after that. Um, that's what it was like for a really long time. And then kind of recently, like towards the end of my college career, middle of my college career, it started transitioning into a what they called an entry-level master's, which was you would get a 4-year degree in something similar, exercise science or maybe biology or something like that. And then you'd get your 2-year master's in athletic training. Um, and then it wasn't incredibly different from what I've heard from people who have gotten their master's degree in athletic training. Just kind of is what I did in 4 years compressed into 2 years, which I find insane, but also really impressive. And the clinical component of it is a little bit different. So in order to sit for what's called the BOC, which is the Board of Certification exam, you have to like hit certain criteria, right? So you have to like have all these different classes, pass all these different classes. Um, of course, you have to pay a fee or whatever that they
Always a
make you
fee.
always a fee to pay for this exam just to like get a job, do what I want to do. And then you have to have a certain amount of clinical hours. So I actually don't know what the BOC requires you to sit for, but I know what I actually did, and I think it's a lot higher than what they require. We started clinicals my sophomore year, and then during my sophomore year, each semester was 100 hours, and
Mhm.
then junior year, each semester was 150 hours, and then senior year, each semester was 200 hours, and that was minimum. Like you had to hit that. Um,
They
you could
keep you
do a
guys
lot more if
working.
you wanted to. Yeah. So that's what, 900 hours. But I don't think it's that high for what is required.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean, yeah,
and
you'd want somebody who's comfortable in the field, the literal and proverbial field, but like you want someone who's confident in what they're doing to be treating and rehabbing somebody.
Yeah, and it's funny though because the actual BOC exam is very entry level. So it's like you learn a lot of, maybe more nuanced things like during clinical rotations, you're learning from people who have been in the field for a long time. But when you actually go to sit and take the exam, it's very entry level. So there were a lot of times when I was studying for the exam that I was like, I'm definitely overthinking this. Like, how do I strip this down? Like, how do I not get too ahead of myself with this?
Hmm.
Um, and that was helpful because the studying process was intense.
Yeah. Not fun, I imagine,
No.
but a lot. And when you're doing clinicals, is it similar to like when people think of like med school, I guess, like doing like rotations of things and
Yeah, similar. There's an accreditation program for schools. It's called Katie accreditation. Um, it basically means that your program is legit and it meets certain standards. And a couple of those components is that when you are going into your clinicals, you hit certain parameters, I guess. So you have a high school, a college, contact sport, non-contact sport. Um, I don't remember if there was others, but you hit all of those like in your time and in your rotations. So you'll spend a semester at a certain place. I worked at a high school, a couple of Division 3 schools, and then one Division 1 school. Um, but you know that there are some athletic training programs that offer other things or maybe even require other components like post-operative surgical residencies or like a PT clinic or different things like that kind of broaden your scope, which I think is really helpful
yeah.
because yeah, we talk about like all these other fields that you can work in, but you don't always get the direct exposure to it. So it doesn't always seem really like something you can grasp.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite of the different experiences that you had, different exposures?
Yeah, there were a couple that really stood out to me. My first one, I did my very first clinical rotation at Babson College, um, I think it's in Wellesley, Massachusetts, but I might be getting that town wrong. Um, I loved working there. I just felt like I had such a good immediate immersion, like initial immersion into athletic training. My preceptors were awesome. I'm still pretty close with them. I chat with them every once in a while. They're great. And then I spent my senior year at Boston College working with the men's ice hockey team. I spent the whole year there because hockey being like a winter sport, they wanted me to be there through the
Yeah.
season. So I spent the whole year with them, and that was just incredible. I had so much more autonomy than I thought maybe even was warranted. I was just like, are you sure you don't want to double check what I'm doing
Yeah.
or whatever? They just had a lot of really like off rip faith in me. Like they immediately had faith in me, and I was like, oh, okay, I can't mess this up.
I mean, as someone who knows you very well, I get it. I get why they had full faith in you
Yeah.
early
Oh,
on.
thank you. Thanks.
What do you think are some common misconceptions that people might have about athletic training?
I think when people hear the phrase athletic training, they think that we're personal trainers.
Mm,
Like that's a lot of the things that I'll hear. Oh, I could use some training or whatever, and they think it's more of like a gym, like a weight room based kind of training. And I mean, we do have a lot of experience in those kinds of things, but again, more on the rehab side of
right,
things.
right.
Like I did take a strength and conditioning class, but that wasn't like the the
It's not the bulk of your
overarching.
day.
No, it's not. The bulk of my day, honestly, in terms of actual load training, would be working with my strength and conditioning coach. So, and just working how to, transition a kid back into the weight room or whatever, or progress them or something like that. And I feel like a lot of, especially female athletic trainers, like when we're doing per diem work, which is basically just kind of pay per hour athletic training, we get a lot of eager parents asking for massages and thinking that we're like a masseuse or something. So,
Hmm.
um, those are probably like the general field misconceptions about what we are and what we do.
Hmm.
Um, but I feel like, even the athletes that we have, like the more and more that they spend time with us, the more they realize like we have a hand in just about like every aspect of it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and you're spending a lot of time with them, especially like I'm assuming the bigger the injury, probably the more time that you're having to be involved in their
Right.
returning to play.
Yeah. Yeah, we're spending, I mean, you know, months on end with these kids, even healthy kids, like even ones that aren't, maybe they need some maintenance work or they had a smaller injury, like we're still seeing them almost on a regular basis, almost daily,
Yeah.
just out at practice or like swinging through or something like that. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, we're seeing them very, very frequently.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of nice as far as like the relationship with the athletes and, being involved with the team and stuff. I'm sure that's fun for both parties, I guess.
Yeah, it's just really one of the most rewarding parts is just being able to like get to know them as people. Um, Especially at like a Division 1 level. They're sometimes viewed as more like business commodities than
Mhm.
humans first. And um I don't mean for this to sound like pretentious or anything, but like I always see them and treat them as humans prior to athletes, prior to athletics, prior to somebody who could put up points or help a coach retain a job or something like that.
Hmm.
Like, they're people first and they don't always get treated like that. But I really strive to be a soft spot for them to land.
Hmm.
Um, because I just know that like at this level they don't always get that.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think, especially Division 1, like there's sometimes a lot on the line for them as far as like their scholarships or feeling like their spot on the team is at risk. And that's a lot of pressure for them to also be dealing with when they're hurt, when they're already down. So I'm sure they appreciate having somebody like you who's, realizes the humanity of it. That's only going to help them. So good on you.
I hope so. Thanks.
And so when you were going through school, what led you to athletic training? How did you get into the field originally?
So it's actually really interesting. When I played sports for a really long time. I played soccer for like I think like 13 years or something like that, really long time. And I was a little bit on the injury prone side. I wasn't 100% healthy all the time,
Somewhere
and
out there,
I was
your athletic trainer's like, yeah, you were.
yes, I was. And I was lucky enough to have an athletic trainer at my high school, which I mean, we can kind of touch on this later, but like having an athletic trainer at your high school is like not the norm. It's actually it's I think when I was in high school it was rare. I think it's a lot better now. But I was able to see my athletic trainer and I just really remember him being so like had his thumb on the pulse of like everything that was going on. He was able to like tape this kid's ankle while talking to this other kid about his, knee rehab or something. Like I just remember I was like, I think this is so cool. I've always loved sports. I've always loved science. And so when I was applying for colleges, I really only applied to athletic training programs. Um, and I remember just being like, I just don't think there's anything else. Like, I love this. Like, this is so cool. It's so interesting. And I got into LaSalle, loved it, went there. And then I remember, like, in my time, my sister, I think, changed majors one or two times. And my mom was always very supportive and being like, it's okay if you want to change your mind. Like everybody changes their mind, they change their major. I was like, that's fine. And I was like, I really love this. I was like, I cannot foresee myself studying anything else or doing much else. I was like, I kind of hit the jackpot in terms of like falling into it and just like loving it.
That's so lucky.
I know. I feel bad saying that sometimes because I feel like so many, like most people do not have that type of experience with college in general. And so I think it's tough for me to tell people that. because I just don't want to seem like invalidating to them. But yeah, I had an easy time with it.
Yeah, you got lucky, you fell in love and you stuck with it. And, you know, I think a lot of people end up doing something outside of what they studied for undergrad. And you could not be more on the nail. So,
No, and it's so funny. I was saying this the other day is that like the system of becoming an athletic trainer pigeonholes you so much into doing that. Like, don't get me wrong, athletic trainers can work in hospitals, PT clinics, all these, we can go to school. We have like a lot of what would be considered prerequisites for other types of schooling. So you can go do other things, but in terms of like studying clinicals to sit for an exam to get you this one job, it does not give much room for error.
yeah.
Um, it really pigeonholes you. So, I mean, I've known people who have not passed their BOC exam or just kind of like fell out of love with it and then had to figure out what else they wanted to do. And I just feel like that feels like it would be really stressful.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, and I think, people's paths towards their careers can be so varied as it is. Like I went into my undergrad, I applied to a biology program and I was deferred by the university that I ended up going to. And when they accepted me, they said, you can come in, but you are going to be kind of like, what did they call it? First year college. So it was kind of an undecided, but it was called first year college. And we had to take this like exploratory career class. And I mean, it was interesting. But at the end of it, I ended up like I applied into micro and neurobiology was like what I did for all of a semester because I was like, oh, I'm going to go to medical school. That's what I've wanted to do for a long time. Ended up in organic chemistry, tanked it so aggressively, um, and kind of ended up changing paths and then fell in love with psychology. Obviously, I met you in my master's where we kept doing psychology. And then now I'm in kinesiology, but I think it's so, lucky for you. And it sounds like you've got such an appreciation for like the path that you've been on, which has just been so direct and what you love the whole time. So I'm very envious of that. That's
Oh.
just amazing. So Sarah, you've worked with quite a few different sports. What are the different sports that you've worked with?
Honestly, I think at this point, the shorter list is of sports that I haven't worked with yet. Um, but as a certified athletic trainer, I've worked now with track and field and cross country, men's gymnastics and fencing, two very non-traditional sports, but they were super interesting. And then when I was a student, I worked men's ice hockey at Boston College. I worked with softball and I think women's lacrosse at Weston High School. Um, I worked men's soccer. I worked men's soccer at Babson, and then did the first half of women's basketball there. And
Mhm.
then I've done
Did you have baseball at one point?
so I did baseball separately.
Okay.
I worked with a baseball team over a summer
Okay.
on Cape Cod. Yeah, so I did that. That didn't really count for anything. It was just extra experience for me.
Gotcha.
Um, I had to spend a summer on the Cape, which was really fun. Those are probably, I don't think I'm missing anything crazy, but like, with cross coverage, and when you're a student, they just try to throw you into all of it. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's not your sport assignment, they're like, hey, do you want to help cover this game and stuff? So, really, the major one that I have not ever worked is football.
Okay.
Um, that's like the big ticket one.
You did
Yeah.
work youth football for a little
I
while. I
did I
remember that.
did work Southern youth football,
You sure
which was
did.
traumatizing. It was horrific. I've never seen 7-year-olds full pads doing a concussion evaluation on a 7-year-old.
Crazy.
I was like, this isn't for me. I can't do this.
I'm gonna need to tap out here.
But
Sorry.
I'm gonna tap out. Somebody else can take over. I can't do this. Um, but yeah, football is usually like one of the really big ticket ones that people do.
Hmm.
Because you can always use more hands. Like there's so many
Totally.
people.
Yeah.
And then B, because it does fulfill that contact sport requirement that the
Mhm.
BOC needs. I just specifically asked if I could do hockey instead because I really want to work
Yeah,
hockey. So,
absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
we're both hockey girls. And I remember we were roommates at the time, I think, when oh, I want to say it was a St. Louis Blues player who had like a cardiac incident, and it was the athletic trainer on the bench who like
Oh,
really kept them kind of going. Do you remember that?
yeah. I think they had to like you actually use the AD on the bench or
I
like
think yeah, but I
just
remember it was the athletic trainer who like was really the one who kind of kept the ball rolling with helping that athlete out, and it was like, man, like it's good to have people who are confident in the contact setting that can just
yeah.
jump in because that's obviously very intense, high stress scenario.
One that really sticks out to me is definitely goes along with that like huge contact and like really just being on your stuff. We train there's a couple different key points that we train so often into like ad nauseum that at some point it's like, oh my God, okay, we get it. Like we know it.
Yeah,
But it is so muscle memory if you need it.
right.
And that's stuff like CPR, spine boarding, holding C-spine, so holding the cervical vertebrae in place.
Hmm.
Um, you know, um,
I mean, concussion protocol too, I imagine.
yeah, that kind of stuff. So, and then also just like kind of controlling a crowd, like controlling the scene.
Mm.
Um, there was an incident when I was working with the hockey team that one of the athletes got pushed from the back too far from the boards, and he slid into the boards with his head and shoulder at a really wide angle and hit the boards like that. And I don't remember if he lost consciousness. I don't think he did. But we had to spine board him on the ice. And that was a situation that I had not trained for in that regard, but my preceptor, like, it was so intense to watch him. And it was like, it was so much. As a student,
Yeah.
it was so much. Like, I remember taking a minute, like, in the back hallway near the changing rooms, just like I felt nauseous. I was like, that was a lot. And then it was myself, my preceptor, and the two team doctors that were there. We all had like a debrief afterward of like what happened, like just kind of talking about it,
Yeah.
um not even like, oh, steps forward, what are we gonna do? It's like, how is everybody doing? Which
Yeah.
was really nice. Yeah, that was like really cool.
It's
But
like a human moment of, hey,
yeah,
this was intense.
yeah, very human.
Yeah, totally. What's been your favorite of the wide variety of sports that you've been with?
So in a biased way, ice hockey. Um, but I think I loved working men's gymnastics and fencing because I
Mhm.
had zero exposure to that. Well, I've watched, gymnastics in the Olympics and stuff, but
Sure.
like I had probably watched like maybe one fencing bout ever before that, and I was like, I
Yeah.
have no idea I don't even know what you get. Are they sharp? Is it like puncture wounds? I don't know. I was like, I have
Do
no idea
they get puncture wounds?
not really.
That's good.
Actually, um but I thought that that was just so fun and interesting, and I learned so much about it. There's like several different weapons in fencing. So it's almost like having different like teams on the roster.
Mm,
Uh, so those two were probably the most interesting, and I learned the most about the sport. But hockey is always a nice soft spot in my heart.
totally. There's so much action going on as well. That's, it's fun to watch and then it's, keeps you on your toes too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the similarities and differences that you see when you're treating athletes from different sports? Are there things that you kind of bring with you across the different teams and levels, I guess, that you've worked with too?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that I always take with me amongst different sports is that, like, at the end of the day, this is gonna sound a little morbid, but at the end of the day, like, everybody's the same slab of meat. It's like, it literally, it is like,
I didn't know what you were gonna say. I wasn't expecting slab of meat. Uh-huh.
everybody has the same stuff. It's just how it's used is different.
Okay.
And then that is really like a big precursor to what you might see. So like every sport has like really common injuries, right? You think soccer, you think lateral ankle sprains, you think um
I think ACLs
hockey,
too.
ACLs, yeah, for sure. Especially in women. You think
Mhm.
hockey, you could think like hip stuff, right? You could think like the groin muscles, like just like very like used a lot in that regard. So you see like really common themes. Um, but yeah, the biggest thing is like the biomechanics that are being like put on the muscles, ligaments, tendons, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
The biomechanics are different. But it's the similarity is that everybody's the same. Everybody's made of the same stuff. Everybody is like physically capable of like, biologically capable of all the same stuff. It's just how much you've trained like one, movement pattern and that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. So yeah.
So you and I did our master's degrees together. It's where I met you, which was a whole 6 years ago now, which
Oh my
is
God.
so crazy in some ways.
That's
Um, I remember when we met as well, actually, because I remember like meeting you very briefly at the orientation that day at UNC Greensboro. And I remember meeting you really briefly at orientation, like in the morning. And then I remember that Dr. Paul Davis had us all over to his backyard. Do you remember
oh
this?
my God.
For
Yes.
like a barbecue, kind of get to know everybody in the program. The professors were there, all of us were there. I think we were all a little bit scared. And I remember saying,
Terrifying.
yeah. And I remember
Terrifying.
saying to my friend who I had going into the program, our friend Julianne, I remember saying to her, let's sit with Sarah. She's from Massachusetts.
Oh my God, really?
Because that was something I knew we all had in common. And I was like, let's sit together because at the very least, we can all talk Boston.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yes,
That is
yes.
so cool.
And I remember that was what started it, I think what started it all. So all of that to say that our master's degrees were in sport and exercise psychology. Um, and I'm very curious as to how now you kind of integrate the psychology into the kind of physical work that you're doing, because obviously they go hand in hand. But what does that look like for you in practice with your athletes?
Yeah, it's a pretty informal process, I'd say, especially at my level. At the Division 1 level, there's hired certified sports psychologists that do things definitely in a more formal manner, appointment sessions, all that kind of stuff. The work I do with it is definitely more informal, definitely more of a supporting role. And I know that like what I know and what I can do has a ceiling. So, it's somebody having some, nervousness and jitters on the line, getting ready to race, and just hearing about that and talking to them about like some breathing techniques that might be helpful and like just like you had said previously, humanizing it all. So, I've done some of that. I've done some um I don't really guide like mindfulness or meditation and that kind of stuff because we never really have like a space or a time to do that. Like it's
Yeah.
never really quiet enough and like serene enough. It's
Yeah, you're not gonna be on the
chaos.
sideline of any sport really, probably.
Yeah, right. And so it's it is a lot of like calm energy, like let's say to your point, like somebody gets injured and we're on the sidelines and they're kind of freaking out. Like it is a calming, like t kind of a mothering energy, like
Hmm.
motherly, like influence, like energy putting out that's very like just supposed to like be a safe space.
Hmm.
And like there's times when I'm trying to like evaluate something or talk to them about something and they're like hyperventilating, crying, like it's so
Yeah.
they're so emotional. And I try to say like, hey, like there's a couple different paths to that. I try to say, hey, like I have a hard time getting information out of you that I need. So let's take I'm a big proponent of like just take a couple deep belly breaths
Yeah.
and everything is gonna be okay. So like trying to calm the breathing, like everything starts from the breathing. And
Hmm.
then, but then there's also a segment of that is like if I've determined that something is not unstable, doesn't mean something's not injured, but they're not unstable. Like they don't need to be going to some further care, like an emergency room or something like that.
Yeah.
Then there is a segment of it that is like, what am I gonna get out of an evaluation right this moment?
Hmm.
Should I just need to make them as comfortable as possible and I can talk to them in either a couple hours or the next day or whatever.
Right.
Um, so there's something to be said about, you know, immediate evaluation does not always give you the most information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting, I think, because I think especially in moments like that, depending on the injury for an athlete, like it could kind of feel like a rip in their universe almost of like, oh my God, everything's happening at once, something hurts, and now I'm out of the game or something. And it's like so many things kind of going on all at once that like again, I think having someone who can have the rational mindset that you as the outside person have with them that it's like, all right, what's needed right now?
Yeah.
We'll check back in, when we need to, when everything's calmed a little bit back down. Because I imagine sometimes too with injuries that like are there cases where things kind of maybe look worse than they are based on like initial swelling or um how much somebody's maybe freaking out from adrenaline or something like that?
Yeah, there is definitely something to be said about that. Like some people's, and a portion of this is like far over my head in terms of how much I know about it.
Mhm.
But having worked with so many different athletes, everybody's like physiological responses can vary a little bit. Some
Mhm.
people are big swellers. Like some people just swell at like not much, like what ends up being not much. Um, and which causes its own problems, right? You have decreased range of motion. Depending on the area that the swelling's in, it can kind of be pushing on nerves and causing some neuropathy, some like numbness, tingling, some pain, that kind of stuff. So there are negatives that would come from that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like structurally we're dealing with something worse.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, some people don't flare up that much. Like
Mhm.
uh I haven't had one personally, but I've heard of people having athletes who have like torn ACLs and they just kind of like limp off the field.
Mhm. Yeah, it
And
doesn't
then
look
I
like
had
what we think of like when you blow a knee.
yeah, and I think a portion of that is like twofold. One being leaning back on your training
Hmm.
of, you know, all of the special tests we learn and the signs and symptoms and the palpating, all the things that we learn. And then at the same time, like knowing the person. So if this
Sure.
is, maybe injury two, three, four, since I've known them,
Yeah.
I kind of know how their body's probably going to respond to something. Um, And that's honestly especially true with things like head injuries and
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff because that is so variable and like knowing
Totally.
who they are is like it's kind of a big, component of that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, and that's again, it speaks to like why it's something I think having the psychology background is probably helpful that you're like in tune with how each person's personality kind of is or things that you can kind of be aware like, hey, something's off, or maybe like, all right, this person is actually okay, or something like that.
Yeah.
I imagine it's helpful for you to have that kind of the skills in your back pocket, if you will.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So I know you've worked with athletes of different ages, different competitive levels. What approaches do you take when you're working with the higher level athletes compared to either youth or just more recreational, just the different levels?
I think one portion of that my verbiage around things might be different when I'm working with a youth sport, right? Much more gentle. I'm not gentle to collegiate athletes, but
Just for the record, she's not mean.
just for the record, I'm not gonna go out there and say that I'm mean, but I I think with adults like college age and that kind of stuff, I have the ability to be a little bit more like blunt, kind of brutally honest because
Yeah,
their development is further along and they can
yeah,
process it and like come up with questions. But like you had brought up that youth football stint, sometimes I was working with like third graders
yeah.
they can barely tell me like, you know, the biggest thing is knowing the difference between like I bumped my leg and it hurts and I'm gonna cry because that's how developmentally that's the reaction that I feel like I should have
Right.
versus like is something actually structurally wrong. And that is
Yeah.
so hard to parse apart the
Hmm.
younger somebody is.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, 7-year-olds, like, well, actually, this is an interesting question, maybe. Is there like a modified version of some of the protocols and screenings for kids? Like if they might not pass a standard baseline adult test?
There actually is. There's a child's version of what's called the SCAT, which is a concussion exam. So there's
Okay.
a child's version. Um, I don't like typically have that in my back pocket to utilize all the time. I think using bits and pieces of it is good enough. I think like, and then if you're ever unsure or just like I can't really, you just always err on the side of caution and just send them to urgent care, send them to the emergency room. Um, Worst case scenario is that they, were in the emergency room for a couple of wasted hours and they're irritated about it, but their kid is safe, you
Right.
know? So, um, that's like a tough part. And, making that argument to parents sometimes is really difficult,
Yeah.
especially working in different socioeconomic tiers. It can be a really hard thing. Like I remember it was in California. I was working a soccer camp, I think. And so they were like high schoolers, I think.
Mm.
And I was telling this girl like I forget, I think she got hit in the arm or fell or something and I could barely touch her without her
Mm.
like just wailing and like
Yeah.
she was like inconsolable from me, from her parents, from her coach, like nobody could calm her down.
Wow.
And I was like, I can't really be sure that it's not broken. I was like, I think your best case scenario is to go at minimum urgent care,
Yeah.
probably in the emergency room where they can give her like a pain medication
Right. To
that's
then just be able to
gentle
do the exam.
to do anything. Yes. So I was like, that's my highest point of recommendation is that
Hmm.
that is probably your next bet. And they like did not want to do that for a while. She wanted to go,
Yeah.
and they did not want to do that for a while. And it took a couple times of me telling them, I was like, you guys at the end of the day can choose to do this. Um, or not. I am recommending you go. And then there's like documentation for that of
Yeah.
saying like I told them that that was my medical recommendation and they did or did not do it, whatever. So,
Hmm.
um, I think that's one of the big things is like how you present information to youth versus adult, and the so that's the biggest difference of those. And then once you get into the adult realm, different levels, whether it's D3, D2, D1, Pro, whatever.
Hmm.
I think one of the big things is like my expectations remain the same.
Hmm.
I expect you to like, if there's something going on to tell me, we can evaluate it. And then if I give you a treatment plan, whatever that looks like I expect you to follow it. I don't expect you to like follow it blindly. Like you are always welcome to ask questions, but I expect you to follow it.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that changes across the tiers are like the time commitments that I guess maybe feel like I can ask of them.
Okay.
Because when you're up in like a D1 position, a lot of athletes at a D1 level
Hmm.
are on some level of a scholarship.
Right.
Um, and so, even at the lower levels, you can make the argument of this, but it has a little bit less merit, in my opinion. But you can treat it like a job, you know? Your
Yeah.
sport is your job. You were brought here and you're I mean, it's very weird now with everything, but you're kind of being paid to do this.
Yeah.
Um, and your body is your product. It's your thing that you're supposed to use. So you have to take care of it, right?
Right.
So it's something that like the time commitment I can be harsher on. I can ask more of you. Now
Sure.
I work around classes. I'm never going to ask you to skip a class. I see them as student athletes in that order.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, do you need to go play Fortnite for an extra hour, or can you come
Or
do your pre-practice, whatever, you know? So
yeah.
it's that kind of stuff. And that honestly is that's like just growing up a little bit. So I feel
Yeah.
like the hardest time comes with freshmen, and then
Hmm.
they get a lot better as they get older.
Yeah. I could that makes sense. I mean, sort of the extra pressures, constraints on them and stuff like that. I can only imagine that like working with them on something that they maybe don't want to do, as far as like rehabbing an injury, that's I'm sure like pulling teeth sometimes, depending on the person a little bit. Let me ask you this, would you rather have to work with a really hyper concerned parent of a child who's been injured on the field, or like a really hyper concerned coach and or athlete at the university level? Who's more fun
Co
to have to work
coach and
with?
athlete, coach and athlete. Working with parents is the most, and if you have a child that is in athletics, just let it happen. Like just trust the process. Like let the coach coach, let the med staff be med staff, let the kid learn. S- Get out of it. Get out of it. Like it
You
is
guys know what
so,
you're doing. You're well trained. She's done 900 hours to be in her job.
yes. I don't, it's just, yeah. And I feel lucky at the college level, like legally, I do not have to talk to them about things,
Yeah,
like
that's true. Yeah.
e even if the kid signs off on it, like, I mean, most of the time, I don't really know percent, but most of the time the kids feel comfortable talking to their parents about stuff anyway.
Hmm.
Um, but it's just like the overreach of, you know, parent to med staff and like all these things. It's just, and I think part of that is just my personality of, I don't know, because I like one of my coworkers like loves working with parents, and
Hmm.
she's just like she'll meet a parent and she's just so chatty and like I think I've had like bad experiences with parents,
Hmm.
so my initial assumption is that they're going to be the same, and hers is the opposite. Like
Yeah.
she's had really great experiences, and then her assumption is that they're also going to be great.
They're all gonna be great with
Um,
her. Yeah.
Right. So I just like there are a couple parents and families that I've met of kids that I have right now. I love them. They are awesome.
And
They are
really,
great
it's about just letting the
parents.
athlete be the athlete. There are inherent risks with sport, but, in situations where there are athletic trainers and other med staff around, like, you guys know what you're doing. So
Yeah.
people, they just need to, it sounds like they need to relinquish some control, as hard as that probably is for parents, especially if it's a young kid. I understand being really worried, obviously, if it's a younger child who's been hurt, but, um, letting people do their jobs and that across, healthcare is important, I think. And then what about athletes, in the university level, I think especially, do you ever see athletes who are kind of nervous to return to their sports if they're like worried about re-injury or just that they're returning too soon? Like, how do you work with that? Because I imagine that is a very real fear, especially depending on the mechanism of injury in the first place.
Yeah, I deal with that all the time. That's probably the um the area that I use the psychology degree the most, honestly.
Yeah.
Um is the anxiety around returning to play from certain injuries. I've seen kids be so anxious. I've seen kids be like way too little amount of anxious, like not concerned enough.
Yeah.
I think I think it's I think one piece of that is the relationship that you have with the athlete. I think sometimes you kind of draw the short straw and it's maybe a really early on freshman and you haven't had that time to build a rapport,
Hmm.
but their older teammates have good rapport with you and have trust in you. And so then they feel that and they know that. So they kind of like automatically put that trust into you as well because of, the trust that their teammates have.
Hmm.
Um, or it's, you've worked with this kid for 1, 2, 3 years and they know you as a person, they know you as a human, they know that you care about them, and that everything you do is like led in that caring, and in like the well-being of them first.
Hmm.
So I think one of the main things that I like to lead with is like, I am gonna push you to be better, but I'm not gonna get in front of you. Like, you have to lead that way. And
Yeah.
so if I feel like they're at a position where they are having a really hard time and they're like super nervous to try, this new rehab exercise or something, right?
Yeah.
Because that is where the biggest stepwise components come from, is a progression in rehab. And then you can progress more in the weight room and then back out onto the field or court. Um, I usually you can kind of tell early on if they're or earlier on if they're gonna have some concerns going forward, like when they get really progressed, if they are nervous to try new exercises, even if it's like, you're doing 3 sets of 10 or something, and the first couple in the first set are like hesitant or kind of like half-assed or something, like, you can kind of tell when they're nervous about trying it, and then
Hmm.
either they're like, I don't really like it, it hurts a little bit, I kind of feel it, or they're like, oh wait, just kidding, like this is fine, like this isn't that
Yeah.
bad, and then they can kind of keep going. Um, I think, yeah, I think that that's like one of the portions I use that sports psychology the most, is just like, hey, look, we're in a really safe environment.
Yeah.
We have so many variables controlled, there's nobody else coming to like slide tackle you or, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
we're very in a controlled environment. Um,
Yeah.
I'm
You're
not gonna
mitigating
let
a lot of
any
the risks in that way, you
right.
know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not gonna let anything bad happen to you. And if I felt like you were doing it wrong, or you were, unstable enough where your biomechanics might like put you in a bad position, like, I'm not going to let you do that.
Right.
Um, Especially like the first time I show them exercises, like I might, working with as big of a roster as I have, like I might not have the time to kind of, hover over them their entire rehab session. But
Sure.
as long as I've watched them do it a couple times, like then I know that they know how to do it, and then I'm
Yeah.
okay with letting them do it on their own.
Yeah. And that probably helps them build confidence too. It's like, all right, if she doesn't feel like she needs to be like watching me like a hawk on all of this, then maybe I am in a good spot to kind of keep progressing on my own, and that just probably builds for them. So that's great. Potentially hot topic a little bit here. But as a woman working in sports, are there any kind of challenges or barriers that you've felt like you faced because of that?
I think that there's a lot of stereotypes around women, and especially young women in sports. Um, I think athletic training in particular is actually, I don't really know what the statistics are, but it's pretty female heavy.
Okay.
Um, I think probably part of that is because it's like a healthcare field, and it's a little bit more female dominated.
Hmm.
I think in my undergraduate class, I only had like 3 or 4 boys in like
Okay.
my 17-person class. So the split was pretty severe. Um, but I think it's the biggest thing is like the dynamics between different types of people, I guess, different
Yeah.
roles is like the biggest thing. Um, I think socially, outside of like the bigger picture, like, social media, I think it's a lot of really positive stuff.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot of championing, but you don't always necessarily get that like up close and personal.
Yeah.
I think, you know, gender is obviously a factor, men maybe seeing women as, not belonging there. And
Hmm.
some sports are definitely worse than others. Some sports, people feel like women belong in less than others.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's also like an age disparity too, of like, not paying your dues. not being in it long enough to know. And like, don't get me wrong, I've been a certified since spring of 2019. So that's 6 years, I think, ish. I am no way gonna know more than somebody who's been on this ride for like 30 years. Like,
Sure.
but at the end of the day, like I think the people that think poorly of people who are younger than them in the profession,
Hmm.
we passed the same test.
Yeah. And if
You know,
anything,
we
those newer techniques and stuff, they're fresher in your head a little bit as well, and it's,
right.
more recently
I've just
exposed.
I've just always like treated myself like a sponge, and I am always trying to ask questions and learn from those around me because somebody who's working swim or volleyball or something, like they might know or have more experiences with shoulders than I do or something like that. Like
Yeah.
I'm just always trying to pull from those because I never want to be the smartest person in the room. And if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
That's such a good
Um,
perspective to have. And like that growth mindset kind of there's always something more to learn. There's always new things to take on. Like I think that's amazing.
yeah. And I think I've had instances with coaches who have um kind of made me work for their trust a little bit more than I think is necessary.
Sure.
But I think I think in general, I'm like, I shouldn't have to do this. Like, you should trust me. Like, yeah, I got this job. The people who hired me aren't dumb, like all that kind of stuff. But
Right.
we've gotten to a good position in our relationships. We've gotten to a good spot, and I think the best thing that I think you can have is feeling comfortable enough to have confrontation because more likely than not, you're going to be the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
Um, and when you bring around good news, it's just kind of like another day.
Yeah.
It's less grandiose than I think when you deliver bad news.
Sure.
Um, because also athletes are going to be more likely to want you to deliver the bad news, but they don't mind telling the coaches if it's good news.
Sure.
Which is, I mean, no fault to them, but it's just um it can kind of create like a tough dynamic within the coaching and support
Uh,
staff of um sometimes I feel like all I'm doing all day is just like delivering bad news. But then there's other days that like I don't feel like that. So
yeah.
um
For athletic training, you played soccer, as you alluded to earlier, for a long time. What was your experience of being an athlete and then moving into athletic training? Were there things that you kind of recognized as, I mean, skills that you brought over or just like areas of interest that you saw? I think you mentioned earlier about kind of the trainer that you had when you were in high school. Like, can you just speak more to that experience you had?
yeah, I think the transition was actually really interesting because when I was going into college, I wanted to continue to play soccer.
Mhm.
And not a lot of programs kind of allow you to play sports while you're in the program just because
Well,
of time constraints.
that's
Um, if you're spending like the majority of a semester playing a sport, you have to make up those hours somewhere else, and it's just
right.
like pretty difficult. So I don't blame them. LaSalle, where I went to school, did let you play sports. And then there was a whole system so actually I think probably like half of the people in my class were on a sport.
Wow.
Um, yeah, somewhere around like a half probably were in a sport. And so they just had to finagle their schedules to work to make up the hours elsewhere in a different time.
Sounds
But
very hectic and busy.
yeah, so it was kind of like if you played soccer, you would have to like do a lot of hours over winter break, and like just like load that over winter break and then
Mm.
maybe go into like summer and like you probably couldn't take spring break and like that. You just had to like make it up.
Yeah.
Um, which would have been stressful. So when I was going into college, I wanted to play soccer. And then I got there and I was like, okay, well, maybe, as Division 3, I don't really know if this is like a NCAA rule or, what, but a lot of Division threes will hold like tryouts, just kind of like open tryouts,
Okay.
in addition to the people that they've recruited to come there.
Okay.
Because I don't think D3 has scholarships. I might be wrong. Don't come for me
Not,
if I'm wrong.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe sometimes. I'm not sure either. Don't come for us
Um,
if we're wrong on that.
yeah. I have no idea what's
We're
going on.
we're very happy to learn the answer, but I don't know it right now.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, maybe we'll see. And then I got into school and I kind of enjoyed not having to balance like the sport and education component.
Hmm.
Um, and so I just kind of decided to hang it up and kind of like it was like a really long retirement, like a stretched out retirement. Like I didn't know I was going to retire for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of made the decision that that was right for me. You know, I got a lot of love out of athletic training, so it wasn't like I was miserable in my program and had to find that joy elsewhere.
Hmm.
And then I was like, being around sports, I'm gonna scratch that itch of
Hmm.
being around sports. So, um, like I was talking about earlier, it kind of just came natural to me. Um, I do miss it sometimes. I did miss being an athlete, for a while, but I don't think I loved playing soccer, but I don't think I loved it as much as I love helping my athletes do their sport now.
Yeah. Because again, it just sounds like all of your passion for this has been building for so long. I'm sure your athletes appreciate it. It's nice to hear, that there are people who care that much.
Yeah. And it's really funny, sidebar, it's really funny that we're doing this interview in March because it's National Athletic Trainers Month in
Oh,
March.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, happy
So
National Athletic Trainers Month to you, Sarah.
thank you.
Amazing timing for this.
I know, right?
This won't be coming out in March, unfortunately. But
This was recorded during National Athletic Trainers Month.
so for everyone who's listening, that's why we're all wishing Sarah a very happy National Training.
Yeah. Thank
She
you so
deserves
much.
it. You've got to do quite a bit of traveling as part of the job. Um, what's the best place you've gotten to travel to? Let's start with that.
Oh, and at Cal or in any of my jobs?
At any of your jobs. I just know that with Cal, you travel a lot.
A lot.
A lot, a lot.
I There are a couple places that I love getting to go back to over and over again, and two of
Mhm.
those places are Seattle, Washington, and Austin, Texas.
Okay. Very
I
different vibes of
I
places.
know, love going there.
Uh-huh.
It is so much fun. There's so much to do. Um, I just love being able to there's so many different places to eat, and the walkability is usually a lot better. Usually, our teams stay either like in a downtown metropolitan area or close to the facility, which is usually in a more centralized location. So,
Sure.
the walkability of it is nice to not have to rely on like the bus or a car or something like that. So, um, those two are probably the favorites. There's some other really nice ones. Um, that are fun. I like going down to the LA area, San Diego sometimes. Um, but yeah, those are the two best ones probably.
Amazing. Super jealous of that. Haven't been to either of those places yet, but
Oh my God, you would love Seattle. You would love both places a lot, but you'd love Seattle. It's like
I feel
very
like I would.
romantic.
Do I still have the tote bag that you gave me from when
Oh
you
my God,
visited? Like,
yes.
yeah, still have that with me. That came to Canada. Um, what have been some of the most memorable competitions, successes of your teams, maybe losses of your teams, like are just like the big moments from competitions that
Yeah.
you've seen and worked?
Um, I think the biggest, earliest one was I was able to work the Hockey East Championships at the TD Garden when I was a student. So that was insane. I was like where the Boston Bruins play, which is like my favorite team. I was like on their bench. I was like, this is magical. I was like, this is incredible. I need to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And honestly, that like the sparkle of that job hasn't that portion hasn't really dimmed. Like I think there are still but I think you have to actively let it not dim, kind
Yeah.
of. Like you have to let it stay like that. Um, because there are some portions that have rusted real quick. Um but I think yeah, that was like the biggest earliest one that was like kind of ground shaking to me.
Yeah.
Um and then there was one there's a couple of gymnastics meets that stand out from when I worked men's gymnastics.
Hmm.
Um and there was one that kind of stands out to me for a negative reason. There was like a really big injury that happened. We were at I think it's called the Winter Cup. And I want to say, I think it was in Chicago that
Hmm.
year. And one of my athletes tore his ACL, and it was like just a really sad moment. It was like his sixth surgery. He was just like, Sarah, it's gone, it's gone. Like it was really emotional. It was like really
Oh,
sad. And so that one sticks out to me. And it wasn't really like a win or loss, but like it felt like a loss.
yeah.
And then another really cool one I've been at a lot of like national championships, track national, like I've been to a lot of those,
Hmm.
but I went to the one year that I was working fencing. I went to their national championships. I think Notre Dame hosted it,
Okay.
and I got to watch one of my athletes win the national championship
Oh, so
in his
cool.
weapon. And I was like, this is like it was so cool. The whole
Yeah.
setup was insane. I was like, am I watching the Olympic finals? I was like, it was nuts. It was
Yeah,
so
you're like,
cool.
I'm in this.
Yeah, and I took videos from it. I was like, this is crazy. I was like, I never thought I would love watching fencing so much, but yeah, it was so cool.
Oh, that's amazing. And what a cool way to like to get invested into a new sport, you know?
Yeah.
All right. So, Sarah, we've made it to our last couple questions here that we ask everybody at the Gold Medal Girls podcast. So my first question is, growing up, who were your role models in sport?
Um, from an athletics perspective, I grew up watching Um, people like Alex Morgan play soccer. I was shown videos of, Brendy Chastain, from the 90s and that kind of stuff. And then I don't really know if they were role models per se, but I grew up from the time that I can remember watching the Bruins. And so all of those rosters, those are just ingrained, you know, 2011 Stanley Cup Bruins roster, everybody on there, like I love those people.
Yep.
Um, Tim Thomas is like one of my favorite hockey players of all time. I just loved watching him perform. And but then from an athletic training side, so it's not something that I could say I grew up being a role model with. It was more
Sure.
like in my adult life. Um, but Sue Falsone has always been a huge role model of mine. She um, was the first female athletic trainer in the MLB and like one of the
Okay.
really most prominent, in my opinion, female athletic trainers in pro sports at
Hmm.
all. And she just led me on this like huge trajectory of like, wanting to be the first female athletic trainer in the NHL. And luckily, several women have beat me to that, luckily. Um,
Sorry for you, happy for them.
Sorry. No, it's so much better that they beat me to that, you know?
Yeah.
They're paving paths and stuff like that. So, Sue Falsone, love you. I've always wanted to take one of your dry needling classes. Like, I just think you're so great.
Yeah. Well, if you need somebody to practice on, I trust you with dry needling. So another question that I'm excited to hear your answer for this, just again knowing you as a person and how you are with new things. If you knew that you'd be good at it, like if you could try it and you knew that you'd be good at it, so that's not even a concern. If you
Okay.
knew you'd be successful at it, is there a new sport that you would want to try?
I've always had this dream of like being really good at volleyball.
Okay.
And this is a podcast, but I am like yay high. I am
Right.
yay tall.
And
I
imperial and metric terms or imperial terms, yay high translates to 5'3".
too.
Okay. I was gonna give you
Yeah,
the extra.
even worse, even worse. I do. Um, and I have no reason to be out there, but I just think volleyball is so fun. They look
Yeah.
so badass playing it.
Yeah.
Like I would always want to be good at volleyball. That would be
Okay.
so cool. I think if you're
Volleyball's
so
fun.
good at volleyball, you're so sick. You're like so
Shout
cool.
out volleyball players, honestly.
Shout out volleyball players. You guys are so cool.
If anyone needs a libero, ask Sarah. She can
Yeah.
slide in
There
there.
are some really top level liberos in the NCAA that are
Yeah,
around my height. Maybe like
absolutely.
I'll give them maybe like 5'4". Like not as pipsqueak, but
We'll get you in
close.
a couple pairs of socks and you'll be there.
Just some platform court suits.
Yeah, a nice thick orthotic, a couple of socks, and then a
Oh
wedge
my
shoe.
God.
What would you say has been a gold medal moment for you? So thinking about a time or an achievement that stands out to you inside or outside of sports that you just know that you're always going to carry with you.
Oh. Actually, I was brewing on this for a while, and there's something that happened to me kind of recently. Um, well, there's actually two things that happened to me recently. And they're in my job, but they're outside of sport.
Mhm.
Um, one of the things that happened very recently, one of my coworkers, I had been out on the training room floor talking to an athlete about, like the plan moving forward and all that kind of stuff, explaining to them their injury, all that good stuff. And then I went into my office, which we have like a communal office, like one room with like a bunch of different cubicles type of thing.
Mhm.
So once you're in there, you can kind of just like shout around to each other and you can hear.
Yeah.
Um, but I went back into the office and one of my coworkers told me that she was so impressed by how well I explained things to the athletes.
Mhm.
Um, and I, she said something along the lines of like, I go out of my way to make sure that they know what's going on with their own bodies. Um, which I just thought was so kind. And it came from somebody who is around my age, but is a newer hire
Mhm.
than I was. So it just felt nice to know that like because I was the only new person at Cal for a really long time. And then some other new people came, and so it's nice to know that I'm having a good impact on them,
Yeah.
and that there are like components to my job that I'm positively showing them, and that they like can lean on me for that. Um, and then another thing coming from my boss, actually, there's I don't remember what it's called. There's this award that different bosses or I don't different higher ups in different departments can give their employees for different levels of achievement. So actually it's called the UC Berkeley Spot Award.
Okay.
Um, and it says that it recognizes exemplary demonstration of one or more of Berkeley's operating principles. And it says we include and excel together, we imagine and innovate, we simplify, we focus on service, and we are accountable to each other. And I was actually awarded this twice since I've been here on two different
Okay.
years. And so that was like directly given to me by my boss. And I love working for my boss. My boss is incredible.
Yeah.
She holds work-life balance to like the utmost importance.
Mm,
Um, and so receiving that from her was just like
that's
incredible.
huge.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was awesome.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on that, especially twice.
Thank
That's
you.
so
Yeah,
cool.
thank you.
Is there a message that you want to share with girls in sport, maybe they're athletes thinking about careers after leaving sport. Maybe they're girls and women who are in athletic training. Um, just a message to the youth.
Um, I think I think the biggest thing is if you're not enjoying it, if you're not loving it, if you're not having fun, there's no point. Um, there's like you get one shot at this, you know, and so you should be filling your life with things that make you happy and fill your cup. And I'm not saying that means every day is going to be, rainbows and butterflies. Like some days are going to be harder than others. I can attest to that myself. Um, but like I've said this to athletes in the past of like, if I tell them to go have fun at practice and they're like, they give me an eye roll or something, like I'm like, if you're not having fun, what's the point? Like
Right. What are we doing here?
it's a sport, at the end of the day, like sports are incredible.
Yeah.
Sports are so global and they bring so many people together. But at the end
Mm.
of the day, they're supposed to be communal
Yeah.
and they're supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
And so if you don't feel like either of those things are happening, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I think and that relates also to, careers in sport, whether you're in athletic training or coaching or strength training or compliance or, marketing or like whatever you're doing, there's always going to be aspects to people's jobs that are just things you like have to do.
Hmm.
Um, but at the end of the day, you should be enjoying what you do. And if you're not, then it's never too late to try to make a career change, 90-degree turn and find what fills your cup.
I think that's really nice. Stick where the fun is.
Yeah.
Enjoy your life. Like you said, we only get one
Yeah.
shot. So,
There's no point.
absolutely. What hopes do you have and what changes do you want to see for the future of women's sport?
Oh, I hope I see the continued growth of viewership. I think that there's been a market improvement over the last couple of years. Um, but I hope that it continues to be genuine. Um, and this might be the pessimist in me. So, but sometimes it feels like the attention around female sport um and women's sport in terms of viewership and like the grandiosity of it. And again, this is not all the time, but sometimes it can feel a little forced.
Mm,
Um, like the you know, channels or the marketing agencies or something like that, like feel like this is something that the people want, so we're going to give it to them so we can get their viewership
right. Versus
instead
like a
of
genuine, we're championing women and are
yes.
supporting their endeavors in sport.
Exactly. So it's not all the time and it's not every channel, but sometimes it just feels a little bit forced.
Mm.
Um, but I think it's Whoopi Goldberg has a channel. I don't remember what it's called. I don't remember any details about it. However, I'm pretty sure she just created a channel that 100% of the time plays only women's sports
Oh,
of all
wow.
different kinds,
Yeah.
all over the world. Um, and so that it's like stuff like that is incredible, like 100% dedicated, not like 2 a.m. replay of, a World Cup game from the 90s. Like
Right.
that's great. Like people want to see that, but like we're talking prime time, airing games, maybe even stuff that's beating out men's sports,
Yep.
like
Yep.
because I understand that certain, ESPN, for example, trademarked, whatever, like can only show so many things at one time.
Right.
Um, But yeah, we want it to be genuine. The people, I think, for the most part, are very invested in women's sports. Like the people who are, ingesting this are very devoted to it.
Mhm.
Um, but I just want to see that continue to grow and continue to be championed. And then I think another big thing is just the continued champion of youth, like young women's sports,
Yeah.
like when they're girls. I think there are a lot of times when you work in this a lot of like body image is like forced upon them and
Yeah.
they feel forced out of certain sports or into certain sports. And like, I think protecting and championing young women's sports, girls' sports is of the utmost importance because that in turn like leads them to lead like incredible lives and
Yeah.
um uh purposeful lives and confident lives. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree. We don't have women's sport without girls' sport.
right,
Um,
exactly.
so I think absolutely you're totally right. Encouraging girls from a young age, keeping them in it against the barriers that we know come up. Super important.
Yeah. Something that I really want to see in the future of athletic training, two things. A, athletic trainers in every high school that offers sports. Athletic trainers are saving lives. They save the lives of your children that are in sports. If somebody has a cardiac problem or a respiratory problem or a brain injury, like we are the first people that are doing something about it, and we are your best chance at that child surviving. I, it is countless the amount of lives that have been lost needlessly because there was not an athletic trainer there because that school district or that school does not hire them.
Mhm.
So, find the funding, reallocate the funding. And then the second part is a continued, and this is another like big hot spot in NCAA and in athletic training, is a continued champion for the LGBTQ community in NCAA widely, um, but the LGBTQ plus community, the trans community in the NCAA and in athletic training. I will always champion them. I will always be a safe place. Um, and I will the NCAA to follow suit.
I completely agree with you. I think, especially when we're talking about people who are already facing barriers in their sport and physical activity experiences, um, we don't need to add more challenge by not having supportive medical staff around
Right.
when that's something that could, like you said, be life-saving. So I absolutely agree with you on that. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for all of these amazing answers. Great to catch up with you as always. I know we talk all the time anyway. I'm sure I'll be sending you reels on Instagram in like 15 minutes. But Sarah, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share about that people can look forward to?
Track season is in full swing. I will be at indoor national championships next week, and then outdoor season starts, and that's always super fun. Texas relays in March, I think. I don't even really know what day it is. Buy her an athletic trainer a coffee. We're tired, okay? I
They're
don't know what
tired.
day
Buy
it
them a
is.
coffee. That's what we're
They're
going to call this.
tired.
Buy your athletic trainer a coffee. Name of the
They're
episode.
tired. Yeah. Um, in parentheses, they're tired.
They're tired. Taylor's version.
Uh, yeah. Um, yeah, like Texas relays are incredible. Just like some of the best people in the world go there. Um, Mount Sac Relays is another place, like not even just college athletes, professional athletes go and compete there. And then outdoor national championships in Tracktown, USA, Eugene, Oregon in June.
Yep.
Um, Look out for the Golden Bears.
That's adorable.
Like bear ears.
Like, yeah, got it.
So cute.
That's amazing. Amazing. And Sarah, is there a place where people can go to stay in touch with you and see what you're up to?
Yeah, I have a LinkedIn. It's my name.
We'll link
Sarah
it. We'll link it
Lindquist.
with the episode as well.
We'll link it here.
We'll link it below.
And my Instagram is my last name, Lindquist.06. I am private, but everybody, that's only so my athletes don't see what's going on in my life. Everybody else is welcome. They don't need to be sticking their nose in anybody's business.
Well, they're missing
Um,
out on pictures of Winston of homes.
I know the boys. Yeah, LinkedIn and Instagram are probably the best places to find me.
Amazing. Well, we'll link those with the description of the episode. Sarah, again, thank you so much. I love you to the end of the world.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun. Love you.
Thank you again, Sarah, for joining me on this episode of Gold Medal Girls. You can find her on Instagram at lindquist.06, LINDQUIST.06, which is also in the episode description with her LinkedIn as well. Another huge thank you to Josh Halliday for the Gold Medal Girls music and also to the Women's Sports Podcast Network. And last but not least, thank you for listening to Gold Medal Girls. Please rate and review the show wherever you watch or listen, and give us a follow on social media at goldmedalgirlspod on Instagram and at goldmedalgirls on TikTok. You can visit goldmedalgirls.com for more about the show, or you can email at goldmedalgirlspod@gmail.com if you're a woman in sport and would like to be featured on an episode. I'll see you next time.